In this video, I'm going to explain to you how to identify between the two different types of salts. Just as a quick reminder, a salt is any compound formed from reacting an acid with a base. There are two different types of salts. You can have an acidic salt, a neutral salt, or a basic salt. A very simple method to identify if a salt is acidic, neutral, or basic is to look at the reactants that created the salt or formed the salt and determine what is strong. For instance, when a strong acid reacts with a weak base, it will form an acidic salt and therefore an acidic solution. But when strong acid reacts with a strong base, the salt will be considered neutral. And just thinking of it in terms of the method I spoke about looking for what is strong, in the case of a neutral salt, both the acid and the base are strong. So you can consider it to be neutral because none of them overpower the other one. And finally, for basic salts, they are formed when you react a weak acid with a strong base. So in this case, the base is the strong part, and therefore you will form a basic salt, which creates a basic solution. On the right hand over here, I have 4 examples to show you how acidic, neutral, and basic salts can be formed. In this case specifically, we have a strong acid, strong base, a weak acid, and a weak base. So theoretically, there are 4 different combinations that could occur: strong acid with strong base, strong acid with weak base, strong base with weak acid, and then weak acid with weak base. But if you notice, I didn't write weak acid plus weak base in any of the scenarios, and that's because for a weak acid and a weak base, determining if the salt is neutral, acidic, or basic is a little more complicated. In scenarios in which you have a weak acid and a weak base reacting, you'll probably want to compare pKa's and pKb's, or even look at how much of the solution there is, or the given substance in general, to try to determine what type of salt it is. So in this case particularly, we're going to stick with strong acid, weak base, strong acid, strong base, and weak acid, strong base. So our strong acid here is hydrochloric acid, our strong base is sodium hydroxide, our weak acid is hydrofluoric acid, and our weak base is ammonia. And we'll combine each of these to show you how this acidic, neutral, or basic salt is going to be formed. And briefly, just below the acids and bases, I wrote here the cation and the anion being a base and an acid respectively. And this is sort of a legend to try to help you form the salt. Because the salt is a compound formed from reacting an acid with a base, you'll want to make sure that you put the right thing that dissociates into the salt. So just as a quick rule, whenever you have a cation, that will be the base, and whenever you have an anion, that will be the acid. Or to put it simply, if you have a salt X plus Y minus, the cation will always come from the base, meaning the X plus, and the anion will always come from the acid. So let's put that into practice. In our first scenario, we have an acidic salt being formed from reacting a strong acid with a weak base. So because our strong acid is hydrochloric acid, that is going to be reacting with the weak base, which is ammonia. And in this case, our acid HCl will protonate the ammonia, forming ammonium NH4 plus. And as I said before, the Y minus or the anion is the acid, so that would just be our Cl minus. And that is our acidic salt, that is ammonium chloride. Now for our neutral scenario, we're going to take our strong acid HCl and our strong base NaOH to form, so HCl plus sodium hydroxide is going to form the HCl will protonate the NaOH to form Na plus water, and we'll also have a Cl minus. So actually our neutral salt will be Na plus Cl minus, and we'll have water. Just as a reminder, the easiest way to think about it is you have the strong base here, and the cation to form the salt, in this case Na plus, is coming from that base, and the anion to form the salt, Cl minus, is coming from our acid HCl. So remember that. And in our last scenario, we have a weak acid plus a strong base. So our weak acid, hydrofluoric acid, is reacting with NaOH, sodium hydroxide, to form, just as before, we'll get something similar to this, but to save space, I'm just going to write it as Na plus F minus. Again, the cation coming from the base and the anion coming from the acid. And of course, water forms on the side too. So that is how you identify between the two different types of salts. If they give you a salt and you want to determine if it's acidic, neutral, or basic, always try to break it up into the reactants that could have come from it. So if they give you something like NaCl, you will know that it came from NaOH and HCl, and that both of those reactants are strong, so you'll know that it's a neutral salt. And so on for the rest. Try to memorize the strong acid and strong bases, as that will make the process a lot easier. And if you don't recognize it as a strong acid or a strong base, it will probably mean it's a weak acid or a weak base. This is an important skill to have if they ever ask you to obtain the pH of a salt, because you want to determine if it's acidic, neutral, or basic to know what method to use. So that concludes this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked the video and found it useful. And if you did, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one.